Hello, BookTube friends and book lovers everywhere. I'm here to tell you what I finished reading during the month of May 2025. I'm going to quickly list the books, and then if you'd like, you could go to the links in the description of this video on YouTube and just click directly to that book that you might be most interested in hearing about, or just watch the entire video. It is completely up to you how you want to do this. So quickly, I'm listing them, and then I'll discuss them a little bit more later. The books I finished reading: Tramp for the Lord by Corrie ten Boom. Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the Sixties by Tom O'Neill. Katherine Barnwell, How One Woman Revolutionized Modern Missions by Jordan Monson. The Master Plan of Evangelism by Dr. Robert E. Coleman. Agnes, Gray by Anne Brontë. Just Open the Door by Jen Schmidt. Brave Companions, Portraits in History by David McCullough. So, to get back into these books a little bit more deeply, I will talk about Tramp for the Lord by Corrie ten Boom, a wonderful book. Corrie ten Boom wrote The Hiding Place. That was her first book. This one is her second book. She's written other books too that I have not read, but I did read The Hiding Place some time ago, like when I first became a Christian. I loved it. How you can't really love having some beautiful Christian people who are trying to serve the Lord be put into a concentration camp, which is what happened to Corrie and her sister and her father. And so Corrie survived, and she came out of it to be an old lady. See that? She's an old lady traveling around the world. Wonderful, wonderful book. Deep Christian. Amazing, amazing memoir. Very much recommended, but if you are going to read this one, it might be a good idea to read The Hiding Place first. The second book that I finished reading was Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and The Secret History of the Sixties by Tom O'Neill. Pretty interesting. I found out about this book because my sister mentioned a certain podcast, and the podcaster mentioned it. So I felt compelled to get a copy, and I did. I got an audio copy. Obviously, I don't have a physical copy of the book, but it was fascinating. And I never read the first book about Manson. That was the Helter Skelter book. I never read it because I didn't want to hear about that kind of thing. I really didn't. And I was 17 years old when the Manson murders happened. I was about to start my senior year of high school, and I had my mind on other things, and it was a terrible thing that happened here in California. And the book, of course, mostly is set here in California. It does go through the scenario of the murders. It's pretty awful, but that was a very short part of the book, and most of it was taken up with interviews that he did with a lot of other people, including the man who was the author of the Helter Skelter book, who was the prosecutor in the court case against the Manson family. So, very interesting book, and he found ties to the CIA and MK Ultra and all kinds of things that are pretty scary, astounding. So the third book that I finished reading was also an audiobook. It is Katherine Barnwell, How One Woman Revolutionized Modern Missions. This one woman, Katherine Barnwell, she came from the UK and she became a Christian missionary in Nigeria. However, she wasn't just an ordinary missionary, she was a linguist, and she was there in Nigeria to learn a village language and translate the Bible into that language. And her suggestions, her methods for Bible translation have been picked up by many other linguists around the world who do this kind of thing. Absolutely a marvelous person. who served the Lord in just an amazing and exciting way. The fourth book I finished reading during the month of May was The Master Plan of Evangelism by Dr. Robert E. Coleman. And I was in a women's Bible study this winter, and we were reading this book. We read the chapters out loud with one another throughout the winter, and it is an amazing, helpful book. It doesn't tell just like how to do it, how to be a missionary, how to be a evangelist, but it tells what Jesus did and his method of evangelism. So that's why it's the master plan, because Jesus is the master. So awesome book. It was a little forward, one-page forward by Billy Graham, but the book itself is by Dr. Robert E. Coleman. Very much recommended for Christians to read. The next book I finished reading during the month of May was Agnes Grey by Brontë. Well, I wasn't expecting to read it, but I had to have something to read because, if I finish one audio book, I've got to have another one. So I found an audio of Agnes Grey, and it was interesting. It was Anne Brontë's first novel, and I think it sort of read like a first novel. She went on a little bit too much about her clients. Well, Agnes Grey decided to be a governess, and she had some clients, little children that she was teaching, and they were so disrespectful and difficult to work with. I really felt for her, but it was like maybe one chapter too many on that. So eventually she switched jobs, and then the kids that she was with in the next job also were not very well behaved. Anyhow, interesting book. I think it would be really helpful for young women to read that book, and it would give them some information about different ways that girls think about the men that they might be giving their attentions to. So I recommend it. But I have a feeling that her second book, which I think is A Tenant of Wildfell Hall, is going to be a lot better. And I do plan to read it. The next book that I finished reading in May is this one. It is called Just Open the Door: How One Invitation Can Change a Generation. And it is by Jen Schmidt. Well, it is a book about hospitality. Jen Schmidt was so well versed in hospitality and so well trained by her own Christian parents that she was able to write about hospitality in dozens of different ways, and she gave all kinds of hints, suggestions, little stories about ways in which she or her friends were hospitable, and it was very inspiring. I unfortunately started reading this when I was living in a travel trailer. My home burned down in a forest fire, and I lived in a travel trailer for 3 years, and that's when I was reading this, and I didn't love it because there was no way for me to be all that hospitable living in a travel trailer, and I was probably not in the mood for it at the time, so I DNF'd it. It was a soft DNF, and since I'm doing the Read What You Own challenge, I thought I'd better finish this one up, and I was pretty impressed. I actually gave this one 5 stars over on Goodreads because I thought she did such a good job of presenting the topic in a lot of different ways, and yeah, great effort. The final book, the 7th and final book that I finished reading during the month of May is Brave Companions: Portraits in History by David McCullough. This is a different kind of McCullough book. It doesn't focus on just one thing. It has a variety of topics. He wrote these as articles, probably for periodicals and magazines and anthologies, who knows. So I was very interested in this book all the way through it. There was no part of it that really dragged for me. There were biographies of some of the people that had been in his earlier books, like Washington Roebling, who built the Brooklyn Bridge, and Theodore Roosevelt, who was the subject of his biography called Mornings on Horseback. There was one about Miriam Rothschild, who I do not think is an American, but most of these were about Americans. He did a chapter on Frederick Remington, the artist, the wonderful Western painter. Amazing career that man had. And so Brave Companions, I thought it was pretty good. I would recommend it to anyone. And so that is the story. That is a brief summary of all the books that I read during the month of May 2025. And I will be talking to you again in another video.